Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's, what time is it exactly? 2:19 a.m. My good friend Senator Markley coined the term vampire legislation a couple of years ago, and I'm reminded of that this evening since we didn't start this conversation until 1:15 p.m. on a Friday night. I'm sorry, a.m. Forgive me. It's late or early, and I'm not exactly thinking as clearly as I sometimes do. Normally, I try and put my thoughts together as clearly as I possibly can and concisely so that I can make a very quick and succinct point when I speak in committee or on the floor. In this particular case, I have attempted numerous times to jot down what those thoughts might be, and I have nothing but chicken scratch before me. And I'm going to rely completely on my concern and passion for the rule of law to say what I need to say here. It seems to me that the issue here is the fact that there are already remedies in existing law for the protection of victims of domestic violence, which is a laudable goal that each of us should be involved with. And I believe every person, certainly that I have been acquainted with on this issue, has made clear that they would strive for any protections for all persons that live within the confines of our beautiful state and country. And we would try and craft laws designed specifically for the protection of our citizens and public safety. As has been pointed out very eloquently by some of my colleagues, this particular bill that's before us in many cases will create the exact opposite situation. It will create situations where people who are victims are going to be disarmed so that their abusers can do them further harm. It's a consideration that should be made before you go forward if your goal is truly to protect the victims of domestic violence. We're often taught in here that we shouldn't cast aspersions about what the desired purpose of legislation is. But when you are faced with a situation where there are known remedies, as have been pointed out, if someone physically assaults another person, they can be arrested for domestic violence and detained. If someone approaches the police and says that they are in immediate danger, and the police feel that that danger is real and there is probable cause, there is a remedy in the risk warrant statute for someone to go and take this person, the offending person's firearms from them. The situation with a temporary restraining order is that it is an extremely low bar. We haven't talked about this at all tonight yet, but what is the process for obtaining a restraining order? It is filling out a form. And because one person fills out a form, regardless of its truthfulness or accuracy, it can result in someone being subject to that restraining order. And if this bill is passed, not only will they be subject to the typical difficulties that come with a restraining order, the inability to return home or to be in contact with a person or potentially go to their job, but they will have their personal property taken away from them. And not just any personal property that might be used to guarantee their own safety. As Americans, we are free people, and that means that we have the right to defend ourselves and our property. And our system of laws are designed to protect us in all cases to maintain that sovereignty. Now, there's a lot of conversation about due process, and I just want to read something that I just read that I thought was really interesting because I'm trying to find a really good definition of due process. The definition that you most commonly see when you go searching for it says that the regular administration of law, according to which no citizen may be denied his or her legal rights, and all laws must conform to fundamental accepted legal principles, as the right of the accused to confront his or her accusers, as an example. But what I found was really interesting was the purpose and concept of due process and why it exists. And it's there to balance the power of the law of the land, or the government, and protects the individual person from it. So when a government harms a person without following that exact course of law, this constitutes a due process violation, which offends the rule of law. And when I read that, boy, a light bulb went off for me, because I'm like, that is what I'm about. I am here because I believe in the rule of law, and that every person should be subject to the same exact laws, and they should be protected in the same ways. We are talking about legislation that is going to potentially put victims of domestic violence at risk because some person, for whatever intent, whether it is laudable or not, filled out a form. They did not necessarily have to appear before a judge, and the person that is going to be the recipient of that order will never have the chance to defend themselves, to say why it should not be issued before it does. It seems to me that because there are mechanisms and remedies already in our law to protect people when there is significant danger, we do not need to modify this existing restraining order law and make it into something that it just is not. It does not reach the threshold that would cause it to rise to the level that we would go ahead and cause this much harm or impact to the recipient. There's people from both sides of the aisle who ought to identify with this. We're not talking about gun owners. We're talking about rights, and we're talking about civil liberties. We're talking about the rule of law and what makes us free and keeps us protected from an overreach from other citizens or our government. I'm more than happy to work with anyone on crafting legislation that will achieve the stated goal of protecting domestic violence victims. But I am not going to help pass legislation that takes the rights away from anyone, regardless of the circumstance. And I urge you all to think hard about whether or not that is a road we want to travel down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.